How you doing? I'm Matt Walden. Today we're here with Mishimoto, and Mishimoto would like to introduce the 2010 Camaro V8 fully polished and TIG welded radiator. This radiator not only is twice the thickness of the OE Rad, but does not incorporate any plastic whatsoever. Fully polished aluminum, fully TIG welded to meet the highest demands of your LS6 engine. Tools required for the 2010 Chevy Camaro radiator installation are pliers, flathead screwdriver, ratchet, 10mm socket, 13mm socket, 19mm socket, a sharp pick, and a radiator coolant funnel. Installation time is about an hour and about a 3 out of 5 on a scale of difficulty. First things first, before you start any work on your Camaro, make sure that it's completely cooled off, because hot coolant can really cause some serious damage. Go jack it up, it's the first step. After you got the car securely jacked up with jack stands underneath of it, go ahead and open the lower drain plug on the radiator and get this thing draining out. Make sure you drain the antifreeze into a drain pan for proper disposal. To help the coolant drain a little faster, pull the radiator cap off. That'll allow air to come in through the top. Next, you want to loosen the intake tube, because that's going to have to come off in order to get this out of the car. And remove the line from the box on this side that goes to the intake manifold. Next, unplug the mass airflow sensor. And remove the top of the airbox lid. That'll give us plenty of room to get the radiator and fans out. Next, we're going to remove the upper radiator hose from the end tank of the upper radiator. And this hose doesn't need to be removed completely from the engine bay. Just pull it off the radiator and tuck it back for a minute so that you can make more space to get this out. After you've removed that, we're going to move on to these two hoses right here, right by the radiator water neck. Again, pliers work just fine to take these clamps off. Now when it comes to the lower hose, we're just simply going to remove it from the thermostat housing and leave it on the bottom of the radiator. And the next step is to remove the fan shroud from the radiator itself. All right, next step is to remove the transmission cooler lines. You're going to slide these plastic rings back off of the radiator end tank. Get a pick tool in there, and there's a little piece of wire that holds this in place. So you're going to want to get a drain pan ready, and then when you disconnect the transmission cooler line, a little bit of fluid will leak out. After you've got the transmission lines disconnected, then it's time to remove the upper radiator mounting brackets, which are found on either side of the radiator water neck. All right, after the upper radiator mounting brackets are out, the radiator can be lifted up slightly and pushed forward. That way we can disconnect the AC condenser. The AC condenser is actually mounted to the front of the radiator on this model. It is mounted by 2 screws on the top here. Now that we have both radiators out and side by side, the difference is plain as day. Stock radiator, plastic end tanks, that's no good. The size of the core is what matters the most on this. This Mishimoto radiator is almost twice as thick of a core as the OE stuff. Not only that, it's fully polished, TIG welded, and is also backed by a lifetime warranty. We're almost ready to put the Mishimoto radiator in the Camaro, but we have to transfer a couple key things before we do so. One, the lower radiator hose is now easy to get off and reinstall on the Mishimoto. Next we'll be removing the rubber isolators and transferring them over to the Mishimoto unit. Those is removed just by pulling them off the bottom pegs here. And last but not least, the transmission cooler line fittings. These fittings can be removed using a 19mm and unscrewing them from the core. All right, we're ready to put her in. Slide the Mishimoto radiator down into the engine bay. And you're gonna have to simultaneously seat this as well as hook the AC condenser back up to the front of it. You're not gonna be reusing the factory hardware to bolt the AC condenser to the radiator. Install the transcooler lines now before the fan shroud goes in, or else you're gonna be fighting that. It's time to go ahead and put the electric fans back in. Again, they slide into the holsters mounted on the bottom of the radiator and bolt in with the top using the Mishimoto supply hardware. Once both fan mounting points are mounted up, go ahead and don't forget to plug the fans back in. Locate the upper rad support mounts and reinstall them onto the Mishimoto unit. Once the radiator is securely fastened, reinstall all the tubes and hoses that came off of the OE, including the overflow tube, as well as the upper radiator hose. Go ahead and replace the top of the air box. And while we're at it, plug in the mass airflow sensor. Reinstall the factory intake tube, as well as the breather line going to the side of that. After you've double checked all your connections and made sure all the clamps are tight, go ahead and refill the radiator with a 50-50 mixture of coolant and water. For a little bit of extra cooling power, I recommend Liquid Chill by Mishimoto. Stuff works great. All right, before starting the car, make sure you turn the heat on high. This will allow any air bubbles that are trapped in the heater core to exit the system. Keep an eye on the temperature gauge as the car warms up and top it off. And once you're all said and done, go ahead and go for a road test. That concludes our installation of the 2010 Camaro V8 radiator. This is Matt Walden from Mishimoto signing off.